So Gavin Newsom, without a doubt, has political ambitions and aspirations. I think he wants to be president. And I don't think he's hiding that fact very well, if he's hiding it at all. So we've been following him from a distance. One of the things he did that pissed me off to the high heavens is he campaigned on Medicare for All and said, oh, I want it so bad and we're going to get this thing. And then he ran out the clock when it came time to vote on it, thereby killing it. So totally stabbed the left in the back. And of course, I'm sure he's taken a colossal amount of money from health insurance companies, which is why he did it. Okay. One good thing he did was he's creating insulin in California in a public way. So he's basically what he's going to do is make cheap insulin that's way lower in price than what the pharmaceutical companies are charging. And that's a good thing. I think we should have public pharmaceuticals all over the country. And that's one way to get the price down. I mean, look, ideally, I'd like to nationalize the pharmaceutical industry, but that's not even on the table. Nobody's talking about that. They're not going to do that. The political will for that is not that high. I mean, if we argued for it, it could be high, right? But the fact that somebody's doing public pharmaceuticals, I think is a good thing. So that's one good thing he did. Well, now I have something that's on par with how bad it was when he killed Medicare for All. And I'm not really exaggerating about that. And I'm going to explain why as we go along here. Governor Gavin Newsom vetoes safe consumption bill. So let me give you the facts, and then I'll explain this in detail why this was a horrible decision. And again, it's not really a matter of opinion why it's a horrible decision. It's sort of a fact, so bear with me. So they say here in Axios, Governor Gavin Newsom on Monday vetoed a bill to legalize safe drug consumption sites in San Francisco, Oakland, and Los Angeles. San Francisco is in the midst of a drug overdose epidemic, largely driven by the opioid fentanyl. While accidental overdose deaths were 7% lower in 2021 than in 2020, raw numbers remain high. Last year, 650 people died of accidental overdoses, according to the San Francisco Department of Public Health. Between January and June, the city counted 297 overdose deaths. The Safe Consumption Sites bill, authored by California Senator Scott Wiener, passed in the state Senate earlier this month to allow San Francisco, Oakland, and LA to pilot the sites. Safe consumption sites, or overdose prevention programs, are designed to provide sterile drug consumption supplies, referrals to treatment programs, and train staff to administer drugs to reverse an opioid overdose. Proponents of safe consumption sites have argued they prevent overdose deaths, reduce the risk of HIV, hepatitis C transmission, and result in less public drug use. Less. Opponents claim the unintended consequences of this bill is to normalize substance abuse. Quote, I have long supported the cutting edge of harm reduction strategies, Newsom wrote in a memo explaining his veto. However, I am acutely concerned about the operations of safe injection sites without strong, engaged local leadership and well-documented, vetted, and thoughtful operational and sustainability plans. He added, unintended consequences of safe consumption sites cannot be taken lightly. Wiener called the veto tragic and said it sends a powerful negative message that California is not committed to harm reduction. Quote, we don't need additional studies or working groups to determine whether safe consumption sites are effective, Wiener said. We know from decades of experience and numerous peer-reviewed scientific studies that they work. Europe, Canada, and Australia have operated safe consumption sites for decades, and the 170-plus working facilities have not recorded a single overdose death. Not one. Not one. Again, they had 650 in California. But with these things, not one. Europe, Canada, and Australia. Did I already read this part? Yes. New York City began operating safe consumption sites in November 2021 in response to overdose deaths in the area. On its first day of operations, trained staff prevented 2 overdoses. The very first day they opened it up, they saved 2 lives. The very first day. Newsom said he's instructing the state secretary of Health and Human Services to meet with city and county officials throughout California to discuss minimum standards and best practices for safe and sustainable overdose prevention programs. Newsom said he's open to local officials returning to the state legislature with recommendations for a truly limited pilot program with comprehensive plans for siting operations, community partnerships, and fiscal sustainability that demonstrate how these programs will be run safely and effectively. Okay, so let me explain exactly what went on here. The reason why Gavin Newsom did this is because he's cucking to the right, because he's afraid when he runs for president that something the right can use against him, and maybe even other Democrats who are more conservative than him, can say, this guy's in favor of, free government heroin, injecting people with it. That's what he wants. He's pro free heroin for people, and that's terrible, and that's wrong. So he's afraid of a political attack, and he doesn't think he can make the counter argument. And so he's just cucking himself to the right and saying, let me veto this bill. Now, again, look, let me be sympathetic here, because when I first heard about this policy, I was like, that seems kind of fucking crazy, right? What, you're just going to have like government buildings where people can fucking do heroin? That's crazy, right? Like, I'm in favor of legalizing drugs, but I don't need the government to like administer heroin for people. That seems insane. It's like you're incentivizing that to happen, right? That was my objection. Now, I changed my mind when I actually read more about it and read evidence as to what these things actually do. And what we know for sure is when you have the safe injection sites, or as you can call them, overdose prevention centers, you have safer drugs, you have safer paraphernalia, so like needles and stuff, you have no overdoses, you have all these social ills are just objectively reduced, like transmission of illnesses, viruses, you know, all these STDs, whatever, all these various things, not STDs, but maybe some of them are STDs, I guess, but you have all these social ills drop massively. So if I tell you, hey, I have a policy, it'll clean up the streets, it'll prevent deaths, it'll make people safer, it'll lower the transmission of all these illnesses, would you support it? You probably say yes. But then when I say, okay, but here's what it is, this is what it is, you'd be like, oh, I don't know, that seems kind of wrong intuitively, right? So you have to get over that intuitive feeling, and you have to be willing to actually make the argument and willing to evaluate the evidence and go into it with an open mind. And I think he was just scared of attacks from the right, and so he cucked himself. But look, I'm not going to mince words here. As a result of what he's doing, as a result of what he's saying, as a result of his veto, people are going to die. There will be people who die who otherwise wouldn't have died because of what Gavin Newsom is doing here. It's just a fact. It's just a fact. So even the fact that, you know, when they crunch the numbers, it's not like more people are doing drugs. They said, oh, it went down. Now, I think the going down is a coincidence. Like, in other words, I think the rate would be about the same anyway, right? But it's not going up. It's not going up. It's not like if you offer these safe injection sites, somebody who otherwise wouldn't do heroin is now like, I'm going to go try heroin. That's not the way it works. That's not the way it works. So you have all these upsides to it. The only downside is that it intuitively sounds kind of crazy, and he wasn't willing to make the argument. And as a result of that, people will die. So it was a massively cowardly move, and he should be ashamed of himself. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.